Mr. President.
I recognize the Democratic Whip.
Mr. President, many of us bring life experiences to the Senate chamber, and it shapes our judgment on critical issues. When I was first married, my wife and I were blessed with a beautiful little baby girl. I was going to law school here in Washington, D.C., and it turns out our little girl had a serious medical problem. The difficulty I faced was the fact that I had no health insurance. I was a law student. And I ended up going to Children's Hospital here in Washington, D.C. with my wife and our little baby girl, and sitting in the charity ward that basically was there for people who couldn't pay their medical bills and had no health insurance. We waited for the door to open and for our family name to be called out to meet for the first time the doctor who was going to treat my little girl. I never felt more helpless in my life as a father to have that baby with that medical problem and to have no health insurance. I'm sure that colored my judgment the rest of my life in my service of over 40 years in Congress. I have always voted to give families a better chance of having health insurance. Having lived without it, I value it so much. It's been a major part of my feelings about health care and about the role of Congress. And so then 15 years ago, when President Obama, my former colleague from Illinois, was President of the United States and set out to achieve something that had never been done in the United States, to dramatically expand the coverage of health insurance to families that otherwise wouldn't qualify law or couldn't afford it. I worked hard to pass that bill. It took us a long time and a lot of effort. I was whip of the Senate Democrats at that point, and I used to go to Harry Reid's office several times a day to talk about the next step in passing the Affordable Care Act. The day finally came, and I won't dwell on the minutia or the details of how we reached it, but we did. Unfortunately, throughout that process, we never had one Republican vote of support, ever. We were fortunate to have 60 Democrats at the right moment politically to pass a bill in the United States Senate. I was sorry that the Republicans didn't join us in this effort. They could have made a better bill of it, I'm sure of it, if they would have joined us, but they decided not to. And so for the last 15 years, the Affordable Care Act has offered to millions of Americans health insurance coverage, which was unthinkable before it passed. Let me give you a couple examples. There was a time when health insurance plans in the United States before the Affordable Care Act didn't cover mental health issues or addiction issues. You think to yourself, well, those are serious issues. They affect people's health. Why wouldn't they cover it? Because they're expensive, and they didn't want them. But two senators came out on the floor here, one a Democrat, Paul Wellstone of Minnesota, and the other a Republican, Pete Domenici of New Mexico, and pushed to include as a requirement in all health insurance plans that it covered mental illness. I supported that. My family, like most families, has a story to tell when it comes to mental illness, and I viewed it as an issue of health, not an issue of a curse that a person has to try to outlive. So we included it, and thank goodness we did. Not only did mental illness have health insurance coverage, but the addiction problem did as well, just at the time we entered into the opioid addiction, which swamped the United States and needed this kind of a response in Congress. That was one thing. The second thing, before the Affordable Care Act, if you had any history of any illness, coverage would be excluded for that illness when you got your health insurance plan. So most plans were worthless for people who came into the market looking for health care coverage if they had any history whatsoever. That was eliminated, and I'm glad it was. We also extended health insurance coverage for children of families to age 26. The belief was simple. When your child, your son or your daughter graduates college and starts looking for a job, they may not have luck at the outset and may not have a full-time job when they finally do find employment. And they probably, in those days, had no health insurance offered to them as part-time employees. So we let young people stay under their family health insurance plan until they reach the age of 26. Those are the types of things that have been decried by many Republicans as socialism, too much government, too much regulation. But it meant that the health insurance market was actually worth something to families who otherwise were excluded from it or found it too expensive. As I said, we passed that major legislation 15 years ago, roughly 15 years ago, at a time when not a single Republican would support it. Now we're back into a period, and I listened closely to the Republican leader this morning, where we're asking, what are we going to do moving forward? Here's the problem. For those people who had limited income, health insurance was beyond their reach. And so we offered a tax break, a tax credit for people to help pay their health insurance premiums. Otherwise, they were too expensive. That health insurance tax credit helped millions of American families afford health insurance, and we moved forward. But there came a time when the Republicans had a chance, and with their own majority, to address the Affordable Care Act, and they started eliminating that health insurance credit. As a consequence, many families, 24 million, we believe, nationwide, face the prospect that their health insurance premiums are going to be too high, increase dramatically beyond their reaches in family income. And that's exactly what's happening. Families across America who qualify for the Affordable Care Act health insurance tax credit are learning that their health insurance premiums are going up dramatically. I received letters and contacts from people in Illinois, which I'll put in the record in just a moment here. But Senator Thune, who is a friend, and the Republican leader of the Senate came to the floor this morning and pointed to two areas that he thinks need to be changed in the Affordable Care Act. One of them is whether your income level should be taken into consideration for the tax credit, and I believe it should, and he does too, I think. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's what I understood him to say this morning. And secondly, that there are zero premium policies that are being taken advantage of by some unethical people. I think those are two legitimate areas of debate. I want to offer, as a Democratic senator, my good offices and personal effort to try to fix those two problems if it means we can come together and restore tax credits for families that otherwise cannot afford their health insurance premiums. We're going to have a chance to do it, and it was Senator Thune who created that chance. He said the Democrats could offer a basic bill to improve the system, which I'm sure we will, and I hope that the Republicans may offer amendments to it or may have their own approach that we can debate leading into it. The problem is we have precious little time. It's supposed to be done before December the 12th, and that's only a few days away. And some of these changes are significant. We ought to take a little time to make sure we get them right. So I'm just saying as an offer, and I hope that the American people follow this closely, this Democrat, and I'm sure others as well on my side of the aisle, will sit down with Senator Thune to try to address the problems that he has raised this morning. There are legitimate concerns. We may see them a little differently, but let's discuss it. Let's do something we hardly ever do in the United States Senate anymore. Let's legislate. Let's do it on a bipartisan basis. They don't have 60 votes on their side of the aisle, nor do we. But if we come together, we can muster 60 votes for a good change and say to millions of Americans with health insurance premiums they can't afford, there's a way out of this. Let us extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits with some changes, as suggested, but do it for a period of time that is reasonable and gives people peace of mind. If we're concerned about the cost of living and family budgets, for goodness sakes, it starts with health care. Health insurance premiums can be so high that people have no choice. Just a few weeks, that Affordable Care Act's enhanced premium tax credits are set to expire. We have precious little time to act. That means on January 1st of next year, millions of Americans will see their health insurance costs skyrocket, and some will have to drop health insurance coverage completely because they just can't afford the premiums. Will they get sick? You bet. Will they go to the hospital? Many will. Will they get treated? Yes. Will they be able to pay their bills with their health insurance premiums? Unfortunately not if they drop coverage. That includes my constituent Jess, a hairstylist in Chicago, who was diagnosed with breast cancer last year. Jess said that if the tax credits go away as they're supposed to on January 4th, First, she'll be forced to pay more for health care and will have to make, quote, a lifestyle change to pay the difference, potentially working more shifts. She also worries about a lapse in coverage if the price increase forces her to switch plans. Any gap in coverage could jeopardize her life-saving cancer treatment. How would you like to have that hanging over your head? The premiums of your health insurance plan go through the roof, and you need constant coverage because of a diagnosis of breast cancer. No American family should face that. Here's the good news, though. We can make a difference here in the Senate. We can stop Americans like Jess from falling off this looming health care cliff. As part of the bipartisan agreement to end the longest government shutdown in American history, Leader Thune, who was on the floor this morning, gave me his word, and I accept it, that he will hold a vote in this chamber on extending these subsidies to Jess and others who desperately need help. Last week, reports emerged from the White House about plans to release a proposal that would extend these subsidies for 2 years. The president was supposedly supporting that. Imagine my surprise after trying to cut or repeal the Affordable Care Act more than 70 times after he promised on the campaign trail that he had, quote, concepts of a plan, whatever the heck that is. Finally, we were to see the details of the Republican health agenda for America. But congressional Republicans jumped all over the White House and told the president he couldn't do it. They threw cold water on the idea of the president cooperating with the Democrats to solve this problem. Now, the president's been tough to pin down on this subject, and Republicans know that they have a losing hand because they have no plan. So far, their signature accomplishment is a law that will kick 11 million Americans off of Medicaid and threatens to shutter rural hospitals in my state and others. It is my hope that the president and Republicans will come to the table and negotiate in good faith in the few days that remain in December of session. Let's do this together. Let's fix the tax credit that is available to families who struggle to pay health insurance premiums. If they don't, we'll put our proposal on the floor, and the American Party will see where each party stands when it comes to helping deserving American families who need a helping hand. If our offer on the Democratic side is rejected, the American public will know with every paycheck, with every prescription, with every hospital bill, which party stood on their side and which party didn't. This time to make a good faith effort on a bipartisan basis is now. Just 13 days from now is the deadline to enroll or change plans before the first of the year. Before and during the shutdown, my Republican colleagues argued that there was plenty of time to craft a fix before the subsidies expired. Well, the clock is ticking, and we need to act on a bipartisan basis. When I voted to end the government shutdown, it was controversial, but I said I would not wage a political strategy at the expense of my neighbor's paycheck or food for his family. I meant it. But I, too, cannot sit idly by while 20 million Americans go without gas or groceries in order to pay their health insurance premiums. This is a question of fundamentals. Will you be able to afford the health care you and your family need? Let's get this done on behalf of every American in red and blue communities alike. I yield the floor.